What's up, guys? It's John with National Sports Entertainment, and I know a few people were asking me to do this playoff simulation for the last several weeks of the season to see who finishes where, who wins the division, who makes the playoffs. And I had already done my playoff prediction video. I did it at the beginning of the year, and probably like, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks into the season. And to be honest, not much has changed. I think a lot of the same stuff's going to happen. I still have the same Super Bowl teams, things like that. But I did want to go into, they have the road to WrestleMania in wrestling, the road to the Super Bowl, which happens to go around the same exact chronological time too. But I think a lot of these have different ramifications. So I took into account who I think is going to have the best record, worst record, who makes sense to make the playoffs. For example, if you look right now, Indianapolis in there doesn't make any sense. They are not a draw. Nobody wants to see Indianapolis versus Miami or versus anybody. And not that every team in here is going to be a major draw, but Indy with their backup quarterback without Richardson, I just don't see it happening. So I look at those things. There's teams like the Vikings, you see they're in there now. All year long, I haven't really been sold on them. But of course, I'm always willing to reassess. So I want to go into, again, and this is going to be, first off, I do like Seattle tonight, I think. I don't even know what the score is for all I know. I guess the game probably just started, but they might get pounded. But either way, I basically, for these next couple weeks, these aren't going to be my exact picks because we don't know what the lines are going to be like, obviously, depending on how certain games go. But I am going to go with, I went over the different tie breaks, and there's certain teams that I liked. They just, for them to get in, requires me to do some creative gymnastics that just don't make sense. So I'm trying to go with what's more realistic, but also makes sense using my wrestling logic. Right off the bat, I got the Rams winning this game. I think they need the win. It keeps them in the hunt, whereas the Saints don't because their division sucks. And the Saints could lose this game and still be very much in the hunt. And again, I didn't really go exactly like every single game. I'm not picking, I think something up to the tune of 48 games we'll be looking at. So I'm more so just picking what I think is going to happen for the most part, what teams' splits are going to be. So say the Chiefs have 3 games. Are they going to win 2 of those 3 games? And also looking at which matchups make the most sense. So anyway, I don't want to ramble too long. In this matchup, because they just lost, I think the Bengals just won, I think it makes sense the Steelers win. Kind of balance it back forth. This one, the Chargers could win, but I'm going to give it to the Bills. I think the Bills are going to solidify themselves. They're going to make the playoffs. They teased that fake narrative that they might miss out, and I just don't see it happening. Now, if you remember at the beginning of the year, I had the Chiefs missing the playoffs. I know it was a hot take. I just thought they were going to have a drop-off year, and they kind of have, but again, they're a draw, and looking at what would need to happen for them to miss the playoffs, I'm not going to sit here and act like, oh yeah, they're going to miss. It would take way too much, so they're going to make it at this point, which is fine. All we can do is reassess and see what matchups make the most sense, but I think the Bills are definitely getting into. Again, Texans here, I think they need this win. The Browns, they have a lot less to lose. They can lose a couple games, still make it in. The Texans need to do a lot better just because of their tie-breaking situation and things of that nature. So I think the Texans are going to win. Not to mention, more people will probably be on the Browns. I think Stroud's coming back, but I'm not sure when. But towards the end of the season, him coming back makes sense. They've been pushing him all year. I don't see why they would pull the rug now. I'll take the Commanders over the Jets. I think the Jets might lose out now that they're out of the playoffs. Also, the Commanders are switching to Brissett, so we might see a couple decent games toward the end of the year. Seahawks-Titans is a tough one. Since I have the Seahawks winning tonight, I have the Titans winning this game. It'll keep them both in it, in the hunt, if you will. And I really don't love either team, but I still think it makes the most sense from a booking standpoint. And speaking of booking, we got the Falcons here because I went into this in my playoff video. I'm more bullish on the Falcons than a lot of people. I just think Bijan Robinson's going to be a difference maker. Maybe they're saving a lot of his big plays for the playoffs. We'll see. and we'll see what it takes to get them in there. It's not too much, but I've maintained from the beginning of the year that the winner of the NFC South is going to be an 8 and 9 team. I personally like the Falcons, but you can see the Bucks have a couple of advantages, so it could be any of them. It's really a replaceable one. Whoever wins, I don't have getting out of the first round. Now, I have the Panthers beating the Packers because I just think it makes the most sense. Yeah, you want to keep the Packers in it, but you still can keep all these teams in it just by having certain ones lose, like the Seahawks. And I think the Panthers are not going to get, or it would be the Bears, the first pick. I think it's definitely going to go to the Patriots. So I think the Patriots are going to lose, and I think the Panthers are going to win enough so the Patriots get that first pick in the draft. They're talking about moving on from Belichick. I think that's just a decoy, so people aren't thinking of, oh man, Belichick's about to get Caleb. And I think that's where they're heading with that. Lions over the Vikings, as you know, haven't been sold on the Vikings all year. Before the year, haven't been sold on them, and I'm not sold on them now. I think toward the end of the year, they're going to fizzle out. As you can see, even with the loss, they're still in here. But again, that's why I like the Lions even more. I went into this a while back and multiple times. I never saw the NFC North being a close division. To me, it was going to be a runaway for the Lions since the beginning, and I still maintain that. I don't see what's changed. And I went into it when Vegas had Lions as a favorite to win the division. At the beginning of the year, not many people, would have agreed with that. Some people, but for the most part, the Vikings were coming off a very good year. I saw that and was like, okay, there's something up. The Vikings are going to miss the playoffs. Again, they could still get in, but I think the Lions are easily going to win the division. Then we got Jags Bucks. I think they make the Jags look strong, especially after they just looked really pathetic. That's just what I think. Again, the Bucks don't need this win. They're probably going to have an 8 and 9 record, and maybe even 7 and 10. I think the Bears will get this win, and it's 50-50. But I think certain teams are going to finish the season pretty strong, get people behind Fields. And again, this game doesn't matter too much either way, but I think that they're going to have it established that Fields is their quarterback. After Dallas just got pummeled and the Dolphins pummeled the Jets, I like Dallas here. I also like it because you'll see in a second, it sets up some pretty nifty matchups going forward in the playoffs. We already got the Broncos, of course. I was thinking about taking the Raiders because Pierce has been doing some impressive things. But I don't think the Chiefs are going to do terrible. I do think they're going to lose at least one of these games going forward, but I think they'll beat the Raiders. And then I do have the Eagles beating the Giants here. I think it just makes sense. Again, they just got creamed. They're playing the Seahawks. I think they're going to lose again. By the time this video is out, they might be winning by 40 points. Either way, I like them to beat the Giants. And I like the Ravens here in my Super Bowl preview match. As I went into before. Before the year and during the year, there's been really no reason to pivot from it. I like the Baltimore Ravens versus the Niners. I like the Niners to win the Super Bowl. I know it seems really obvious right now, but they can do a lot in a couple weeks, and I think they'll have a week or two where the Niners don't look great, and it'll set it up. So there is that possibility of Mahomes versus the world. That's really the only alternative I see. I've seen people mentioning Dolphins, Niners, some people mentioning Bills, Niners. You could get it all. I think Ravens, Niners makes the most sense, and then again, if that didn't happen, I think Mahomes versus the world makes sense, but yeah, I don't see what's especially if the end of the season finishes the way I think. I think Ravens Niners is still looking really strong. Jets Browns, I'll give this one to the Jets. It makes things interesting, and again, it's a 50-50 one. I don't think the Jets are going to lose out. I think they're going to get a pretty bad record so they can get a pretty good draft pick. And then Lions Cowboys. I think the Cowboys will take this game. At home, they like to establish the Cowboys. And again, it's one that, and you might see it already, it's one that makes a pretty nifty, as I went into, playoff matchup. And that's another reason I'm picking these. I'm trying to look at what makes sense for the playoff matchups. And there's some pretty cool playoff matchups. I think the Ravens will beat the Dolphins here. Again, I think the Ravens are just going to be very strong. They might just be an as advertised powerhouse. You do get them sometimes. The Eagles were kind of like that last year for the NFC. And I think this year the Eagles are just going to be the team that, again, has a great record. Probably goes to the championship but loses. I don't have them going to the Super Bowl. But yeah, the Dolphins probably would make a little more sense to win this game, but I think the Ravens are going to win it at home. I think it'll have a playoff vibe to it. And again, I'm not really picking every single game. I'm just trying to go into how many wins I think these teams are going to get and what matchups I think are going to make sense. And as you already know, I'm going to have the Bills beating the Patriots because I just don't think the Patriots are going to win any more games. I think they're going to. I can't say it enough. I think they're going to get Caleb. I'll take the Falcons over the Bears again. Uh, Technically, the Commanders are not a team Deion played for. I know he played for the franchise, but I like my theory of every Deion team making the playoffs. Not only that, I do think Atlanta is a good team that's like an outlier. I like the Bucks. I think Baker's a good sell, and I thought about Baker versus the Rams. That makes some sense, but I just don't think it's enough. I think the Bucks were there with Brady. They're going to have some rebuilding, and I think getting the Falcons in there would be interesting. They always talk about how the team that made the playoffs or had the best record in the NFC South, the next year they have the worst, and it's been happening for years. So this year the Panthers have had the worst last year, but the Falcons are just a team that has not really been there since, gosh, I think Matt Ryan. So I think getting them back there, and again the Bijan Robinson storyline I think is going to really bear true that having a top running back could be more pivotal than having a top quarterback. Obviously, all the other teams in the division have a franchise or at least a quarterback that they consider their quarterback. The Falcons don't. It's all Robinson. With all the running backs complaining that they're not getting paid enough, I think it makes sense and stands to reason that the team with the next breakout running back could get in the playoffs. So I like the Falcons there. Also because I think people are going to be all over the Saints and Bucks. I think the Falcons make sense for that reason, kind of fading the public. I like the Raiders to beat the Colts. I think Pierce, they're going to do some nice things with him going forward. And I don't think the Colts are getting in the playoffs. As of now, they're getting in, but you can see I got them booted out now. I just don't think they make any sense to make the playoffs. Jags, you got to make them look strong. And at the same time, I think, again, while I think the Panthers are going to not have a worse record than the Patriots, they're not going to win out or anything, in my opinion. There's a reason they won this week, though, because now they're only 1 game behind the one game behind the Patriots. Titans, Texans. I'm going to go with the Titans. Go with the split here for a few reasons. Again, it makes some matchups interesting, but it keeps, if you look down here, you look at the team's record, it keeps the Titans. They're there at 7-9, obviously, with this projection, but they have, depending on how the other weeks go, like I said, I'm just mostly picking the sum of the games. It keeps a lot of these teams in the hunt. Obviously, the Colts, the Titans, all these different teams in the AFC North are all in the hunt, and I think that's what they want. So I think we're going to get a split where the Titans get that one back, and then I got the Giants beating the Rams. And again, it's just because I don't think the Rams are going to win out. So they're going to lose one of these games. They like Tommy DeVito, so I can definitely see that happening. I don't see this upset happening though, so I have the Eagles beating the Cardinals, and I have the Saints beating the Bucks. I think these teams are going to kind of trade off wins, so basically they all wind up the same record. If you look at the bottom right, we got Atlanta, New Orleans, and Tampa, basically all with the same exact record. And again, I think that prediction is going to come true, that where the winner of the division has exactly an 8-9 record. It just makes sense to me. I think we're going to get some upsets, so let's go with this could be a game where McCaffrey's hurt or something, so I like the Commanders to get this upset. I think it makes a lot of sense. It'll get a lot of people off San Francisco too, if they look pretty ugly against a really bad team. And I just have a feeling that we're going to see something like that, so I'll take the Commanders. And again, you got to get some upsets. I can't pick all favorites. I do like the Steelers to beat the Seahawks because I don't have the Seahawks getting in the playoffs. And again, I think the Steelers are Tomlin's never had a losing season, so you got to keep that alive. And they're a good enough team, definitely, to flirt for the playoffs. Chiefs, again, I don't think they're going to do anything crazy, so I think the Bengals will beat them here. Keep the Bengals in it as well. Again, the entire AFC North, as you can see, with a winning record. So I think that's a pretty interesting stat line, and I don't think it's ever happened, so they love to do stuff like that. So I think the Bengals will get that win. I think the Chiefs at least are going to lose in either week 17 or 18. I don't think they're going to win the next 3 weeks. I got the Chargers beating the Broncos because they got rid of their coach. And then I do have them losing to the Bills, but I do think it's like a change. So the Broncos have a lot of rebuilding to do, a lot of chemistry issues, whereas the Chargers are looking great now because their offensive coordinator got promoted. And in general, I think going into next year, they're going to be a much more hyped team. So teams like the Chargers, the Bears, Giants, towards the end of the year, I do have them winning a good bit of games. And I got Green Bay beating Minnesota. Like I said, I'm not sold on Minnesota. I think they're going to miss the playoffs. The story will probably be how this year they had a bunch of close games, but they didn't win them at the rate they did last year, and it's going to come back to bite them. So you can see how the playoff picture's shaping up. We got the Steelers and Chiefs right now. We got Jags, Texans. On the other side, we got the Rams. So we'll see what changes. And I don't have much changing, to be honest. I have a couple of these teams getting booted, though. This one doesn't even matter too much, Seahawks, Cardinals, but I think the Cardinals will get this. And the biggest reason I like the Cardinals is it moves them to, if you look at their record, 4-13, which of course is going to be better than the Patriots. And while we're at it, we'll just give the Jets this win because I think the Patriots are definitely losing. And while we're at it, we're going to give the Panthers this win because I think it makes sense for a plethora of reasons. It makes the Patriots, with the record of 3-14, the undisputed number one pick, which I think is what they're going to get. And it knocks the Bucs out of the playoffs because I don't think the Bucs are going to get in the playoffs. So it does a couple things. Steelers, Ravens, I like the Ravens. Again, I think they're just going to do a good job of finishing off the season strong, looking really good. Probably being the as advertised powerhouse of all the entire group. I think Lamar wins MVP, as a lot of people were saying now. I said at the beginning of the year, and a lot of people said he was going to flop. And I had a feeling because of the franchise tag, all the fake beef, that he might come out and do good. So that was one of the reasons they were my Super Bowl pick. So, for the AFC at least. So I think Baltimore finishes strong. Knocks Steelers out of the playoffs, as you can see. I like Cleveland because at least they have culture. The Steelers do, but it's mostly just Watt. And they got Trubisky, and now they're flipping between him and Pickett. I just don't think it makes sense. Cleveland committed to Flacco. Their defense is better than Pittsburgh's. I think they're statistically like one of the best in like 50 years. So I do think the Browns make a lot of sense to make the playoffs. So I do have them making it. As you can see, I don't have the Colts. I don't have all these other teams with no quarterback or a terrible quarterback, no draws. And because Cleveland and Detroit, if they both make the playoffs, it'd probably be the first time in a very long time. And I think they're going to love to run at that angle. So I think we'll get Cleveland, Detroit. Then we got the Vikings, Lions. I'm going to take the Vikings because, again, you got to keep it interesting. So, again, you'll have the Vikings here very close to a wild card spot, basically fighting the Saints, fighting the Rams, all these other teams. And it'll be a season split where, the Lions get one, the Vikings get one. That's just what I think happens. I do think the Packers are going to beat the Bears, though. And just because I think they want to give, Jordan some love, no pun intended. I just think that they make more sense. And the Bears, even the Bears finishing here with a record of 6-11 is very impressive. So, again, they're not going to win out. So I think the Packers make sense. And you'll see why some of these make a lot of sense in a second. Now this one, Texans, I think, again, they beat the Colts. Colts aren't getting in. Just don't see it happening. And I think the Texans definitely are. I think CJ will be back in time. So probably the most exciting team where a lot of people are going to be rooting for them. I think you got to put the Texans in at this point. And I got the Chargers beating the Chiefs for a few reasons. If you saw what just happened in the AFC bracket, That's the biggest reason I have the Chiefs losing one of these last two games. It opens up a very interesting rivalry. And again, to finish the season, I think you give Moore a win as the head coach. I think Chargers winning makes sense at home here. And it kind of fits the Chiefs' meltdown narrative where they're still in the playoffs but not looking as good as they were. Same with the Raiders. Again, I think they're going to finish like the Chargers where they can say their coach did a good job. A lot looking forward to going into next year. I thought the Broncos might get in because Russell, kind of like last year, but I thought this year they'd get it done. I was going to put them in over the Browns. Too much needs to happen. So I like to be a realist, and I just don't see it happening. So yeah, they could win out, and other teams could lose. I don't think so. I think they'll be out by week 17, and it's definitely going to be the Browns ahead of the Broncos. Again, like I said, at least the Browns have the fact that they haven't been there in a while. Them and the Lions both making it would be very interesting. And the fact they got Myles Garrett, they got Cooper on offense, Hunt. People know who Flacco is. He's seasoned. If he wound up playing Buffalo, that would be interesting. Or Baltimore. So there's a lot going on with the Browns where some of these other teams, there's just not much going on. Bills, Dolphins, I like the Bills. I think they're going to wind up making a run and being a higher seed. And again, I like these matchups a little more too. Dolphins, they keep pushing this narrative they can't beat good teams. So it'll be curious to see what they do against the Bills. But again, I had already gone into, there's a couple matchups that kind of write themselves, and that's another reason that I'm going with some of these teams. I like the Falcons over the Saints. Nothing too crazy there. I just think the Packers are going to get in the playoffs instead of the Saints. And I think the Falcons are going to get in instead of the Saints or the Bucks. Again, I think they're going to give Jordan some love. And I think the Packers are a perfect team. It's been a little bit kind of following the same recipe as when they had Aaron. So I think they get him in there. And he paid some dues last year. I think Green Bay is another one of those teams where they can definitely have exciting games. I think they're more of a draw than Seattle, the Saints, and some of these other squads. So I do like the Packers to get in. Eagles, Giants. I'm going to go with the Giants because it gives Dallas the backdoor 1 seed, which I think a lot of people wouldn't see coming. And it doesn't necessarily give it to them. You'll see in a second why. But it, in my opinion, just makes it where it's going to be, instead of everyone assuming it's going to be Philly, Dallas could definitely come on late and take that number 1 seed. And more importantly, DeVito, he's playing Philadelphia. He's a Jersey guy. I think it makes sense that he might get the upset. I'd take the Rams over the Niners. Again, I think the Rams probably finish with a winning record. I think Rams, Packers, they're my 2 picks. So obviously, Cowboys, Niners, Lions, Eagles are the obvious picks as far as who's going to make the playoffs. The ones where you have to kind of guess are going to be the Packers, the Rams, and the Falcons. And those are the 3 I have just because I think they've pushed the Rams enough this year. I think they've pushed the Packers enough this year. They're excitable. I think the Seahawks are kind of just drawing dead. Again, same with a lot of these other teams, the Vikings. And I think they want to freshen it up a bit. And again, if you've noticed an interesting rivalry with the Rams, it's not an accident. It almost writes itself. These 2 teams will basically match up unless there's a really weird result, like one of them loses out or wins out. So I'm going to go into the matchups part in a second, but I like the Rams to get the upset here over San Francisco. Like I said, I could see San Francisco losing a few towards the end of the year, just like they did in the beginning of the year, and then people will think they're a streaky team. Jags, I'll give them this win. I think you got to establish them at the end of the year and make them look strong. So when they get matched up against KC in the second round or whoever it might be, Buffalo, they will be considered a team that can win. At Titans, I just don't think they're going to do it. And then finally, one more upset here. It could be an upset. So this one changed a lot. We can have the Eagles with the 1st seed 2 years in a row, which definitely could happen. Or we could have Dallas sneak in and get the 1st seed. So it could be either one. It doesn't change too much. Personally, I'm going to go with I did like the theory that the Eagles get the first seed 2 years in a row because I feel like Boston's going to do the same thing in the NBA, and I just think it's a script that they're going to run with. And again, these picks aren't. I'm not picking like every single game that I think is going to happen. I'm just trying to go with, okay, I think Dallas will win 2 out of 3. I think Buffalo's going to win out, etc. Whatever I think is going to happen. But yeah, you can let me know which one you think makes more sense. Personally, I think Dallas sneaking in and getting the first seed does make sense. But since they're talking about a Hurts injury and things of that nature, I'm going to go ahead and just say that the Eagles hold. So either the Eagles beat the Giants and they would get the first seed, or they lose and the Cowboys lose. But I'm going to go ahead and say that the Eagles do get the first seed here, and it'll be 2 years in a row. And then if Hurts is, quote, banged up, they can kind of explain away, okay, he's got a week. And I like the idea of Dallas playing Atlanta because they're both Deion teams. So all Deion's teams are in here outside of the team he never really played for, the Commanders. He played for the Redskins, of course, but he played for the franchise, so I guess that's a reach. And that's not really the reason I have the Falcons in there. It's more the fact that, again, I think not much of the public's going to have them, and I think Robinson can go off and push the running back narrative. Now, if you look at records, the Patriots are 3-14, one loss, one more loss than the Cardinals and the Panthers, and the Bears would get the Panthers pick. So this would give Bill Belichick Caleb, and I think that's exactly what we're going to get. That's what they keep talking about. Now I want to go into the matchups, and the matchups are the fun part. Now, this doesn't let me do the simulator as far as the playoffs, but I'll be doing that anyway. Like I said, I already have a playoff simulator video, and it's not much different than this. A few teams that I had in the beginning of the year aren't in. Like on the AFC side, I did have Cincy in there instead of Houston. And I had the Raiders getting in. I had the Raiders getting in instead of Cleveland. So they're not exact. On the NFC side, I had the Giants getting in, actually. I didn't have the Packers getting in. So, of course, they're not all perfect. But, again, the teams that I had getting in, the Giants, I think at one point I thought the Jets might sneak in. They weren't going to go out of the first round anyway. So all the teams that I had at least advancing are still in. And this is just what I think makes sense now. Like I said, I could try and force the Broncos in there and knock out the Browns, but I think the Browns make so much more sense, especially when you throw in the possible Flacco connections and the fact that the Lions are in too. But let's look at it from bottom right first. Dallas, Atlanta, good matchup. Dallas, pretty inconsistent. Atlanta's pretty boring team, I get that. So you can replace them with the Bucks. I'm not saying that's not going to happen. Or the Saints. I guess Saints could be a good one. I just think we're going to get Atlanta. Sometimes you just get a middle-of-the-road team, and it's been a bit for them. So I think we would get Dallas, Atlanta. Robinson probably goes off. I think Dallas would, of course, win this game, but I think we get something along these lines. Then we got my personal favorite. We got the quarterback swapperoo. We got the Stafford versus his old team with Goff versus his old team. I think Stafford's going still. I can't remember, but either way, it's a very interesting storyline, and I think this one writes itself. This is one of the biggest reasons I like the Rams to make the playoffs. I think Lions-Rams is a beautiful rivalry because, again, you have both quarterbacks switched. You have the team that's been very successful. They have the Kurt Warner years. They just won a Super Bowl. And the Lions, who I could see them showing the graphic now. You know, the Rams have been to more Super Bowls than the Lions have been to playoff appearances in the last 20 years or something like that. So I think this makes perfect sense. Of course, the Lions would bump the Rams. And then we get Packers, Niners. I could see this one being one where it's very close, but then the Niners wind up winning it. I think the Niners would bump the Packers here. Eagles get the bye. On the other side, we got Cleveland, Jacksonville. Very beautiful game. If you notice, I have these set up because I don't think we're going to get a lot of three-peats, which is where obviously we have divisional matchups playing each other. So like Baltimore and Cleveland, things of that nature, Buffalo and Miami. I think it just kind of, people saw it twice, unless it's very, very entertaining. Maybe like, well, Dallas, Philly wasn't entertaining, but I don't think people want to see it 3 times. So it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I think they're going to mix it up. So Cleveland Jacksonville is a great one because you have a stifling defense in Cleveland, and then you have Jacksonville with Lawrence. So something's got to give. Two gritty teams. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then Houston Buffalo too. You got the young C.J. Stroud. I think he'll be back versus Josh Allen. That could be a great shootout. And at the same time, you have two teams that are pretty polar opposites if you think about it. Like one is just stacked, and the other team is a lot of heart. So I think that's a good matchup. And my favorite matchup is the bottom one, of course. We got Miami and Kansas City. Tyreek Hill, who said Mahomes is nothing without him. And what are we seeing every week? Mahomes win in spite of his receivers. So when he gets matched up against, Tua, who Hill said is a better quarterback than Mahomes, it makes for a very interesting dynamic. So that's what I like for these matchups. Again, some of these teams can be flipped around. I'm not saying they're going to be exact. Maybe we get the Dolphins, Chiefs in the second round. But this is what I think happens. These are the playoff teams I think we get. And it won't let me pick, again, winners of these particular games. I just messed it up on me. It won't let me pick winners of these particular games, but again, we can do it mental-wise. So, in my bracket, I would have Dallas winning, Detroit, all the favorites winning in the NFC. Dallas, Detroit, and San Francisco all winning. And should that happen, we would then get Dallas and Philly, and we would get San Francisco and Detroit. And you can already see where that's going, right? So that's just what I think happens. I think Detroit would get booted at that point, and it would be San Francisco versus either Dallas or Philly. I think San Francisco versus Philly because so many people are saying Dallas because of the rematch. They're forgetting about last year's rematch where San Francisco didn't get a chance against Philly. So I think something like that happens. Dallas wins, Detroit wins, San Francisco wins. Then San Francisco beats Detroit, and then Dallas plays Philly. And I think Philly would win that game, and we get Philly and San Francisco. San Francisco goes to the Super Bowl. That's just what I think is going to happen. Of course, I could be wrong. It could be a different route, a different path. But I think it'll be pretty close to that. On the AFC side, a little more complicated. We got Houston, Buffalo, Miami, Kansas City, and Jacksonville, Cleveland. I think Jacksonville will beat Cleveland. I don't think they're going to have a backup quarterback going beyond the first round. Again, you could get, I guess, Flacco to advance because then he would play Baltimore, actually. If Cleveland won, he would play Baltimore in the next round, which would be very interesting. I just don't think they're going to boot Jacksonville in the first round. But, again, looking at it, it's pretty intriguing, right? It makes you think about it. But no, I think we're going to get Jacksonville beating Cleveland. I think we're going to get Houston beating Buffalo. I think that's the upset we get. I think it makes a lot of sense. And people would be really be rooting on CJ, and I think that makes sense. So I think Houston gets out of the first round. Jacksonville, and I think Miami Chiefs. Do they knock the Chiefs out in the first round? They could. I don't think they would with the Bills and the Chiefs. I know a lot of people are saying we're going to get a rematch of the Chiefs and the Bills. We might. But I do think the Chiefs would beat the Dolphins. That's just what I think would happen. So then we would get Baltimore and Houston, obviously. They would play Houston, and the other two match it would be Jacksonville versus Kansas City. And obviously the story is Jacksonville cannot beat Kansas City. Now in this case, Jacksonville would be at home. Now again, it could be flipped. Jacksonville might get a lower seed and play them in Arrowhead. It could be a million things. But I actually think Jacksonville plays Kansas City. I think Jacksonville wins. I think they finally get past the hump. Again, it could be Kansas City. I'm not saying it can't be. Kansas City, Baltimore is a very interesting matchup. But personally, I like Houston to beat, like I said, Houston to beat Buffalo. They'll play Baltimore. I like Kansas City to beat Miami. And then they'll play Jacksonville. And I do think that Jacksonville will beat the Chiefs. Which would leave, of course, Baltimore and Houston. I think Baltimore would beat Houston, and then we get Baltimore and Jacksonville. So I got Baltimore and Jacksonville on the AFC side, and I think Baltimore is going to win that and play the Niners, where the Niners are going to win the Super Bowl. So we'll see how close this is. This could be way off. Like I said, I do see the appeal of Kansas City and Baltimore, of course. We could get Kansas City Buffalo. Again, I don't think we're going to get too much Kansas City Buffalo. We got them a lot already. I get it's a very appealing playoff draw, so maybe the Bills do beat the Texans and we wind up getting it. You know, we get Chiefs Dolphins, Chiefs Bills, Chiefs Ravens, something like that. Personally, I think Texans getting out of the first round makes a lot of sense. Buffalo's had a lot of hiccups. Losing in the first round would basically solidify the Diggs trade, which is definitely going to happen. They switched coaches or offensive coordinators, so I don't think they're going to do too much after doing that. I think they're going to have a little bit of a soft rebuild. So yeah, that's what I have happening. My major upset would be, again, Bills losing in the first round here, and the matchups I think make a lot of sense. Especially look at the Rams, Lions. I think it's a beautiful one. So yeah, I didn't want this to be all over the place, but I wanted to pick them. As you can see, the playoff picture changing and how it kind of falls into place. And again, I tried to pick realistically, where we don't have teams winning out or teams losing out. Certain teams we have losing. Like I have, I think it's the Patriots losing just because I really think they're going to get that first pick. But they don't really matter for the playoff picture anyway. But some of these other ones, Detroit, Los Angeles, I think Green Bay, San Francisco, great matchup. And then Dallas, whoever they play is going to be garbage. Whoever plays the 4 seed, because the 4 seed is definitely going to be the Bucks, Saints, or Falcons. It's not going to be a great game, but I think Dallas, Atlanta makes sense. Again, 2 of Dion's teams, and I think on both sides, I think we're mostly over the target here. We might be, again, on the AFC, 5 of the teams are pretty obvious: Jacksonville, Buffalo, Kansas City, Miami, and Baltimore. So Cleveland and Houston are the only real guesses. Of course, it could be the Broncos. It could be. I don't think the Titans can get in. Maybe they could. But it could definitely be the Colts. The Colts are actually a favorite to get in. It could be a lot of other teams. I just personally think that it's going to be the Texans. And yeah, it could be the Steelers. I just don't think the Steelers are getting in. I think they will have their winning record. So Tomlin can continue that. The entire division with a winning record. AFC North, I think, is a very interesting dynamic. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be the Browns that wind up getting in. And again, because of the possible Flacco storylines, I think it could be interesting. So they might not get Jacksonville in the first round. Maybe they do get, maybe Baltimore doesn't get the first. It's looking like they will, but maybe Baltimore doesn't get the first seed and we get Baltimore and Cleveland in the first round. Or we could get Cleveland and the Bills if them and the Texans swap place, right? And then we got Texans, Jacksonville, 2 young, hungry teams. And then we got Cleveland, Buffalo, which was where Flacco started. So it's all very interesting. Also, I think there's some political ties because you got Joe, and obviously he played for he played for Delaware, if you didn't know. And I think that a lot of these things are connected. But either way, yeah, I think it's going to be something to the effect of this. And I'll do a bracket where I can, eliminate teams and do that once we have the official playoffs. But I know a lot of people were asking me to do the final 3 weeks so they can do futures, kind of see if we're aligned. So I wanted to get this out and go into, in detail, the next 3 weeks. Again, I'm not saying all these games are going to happen. What I'm saying is for the Chiefs, if they could lose to the Raiders and Pierce, but I haven't beaten them. I have them losing to the Bengals. And in the final week of the season, Chargers that I have them losing to. So I have the Chiefs losing a couple. Which ones they lose, it doesn't, it could be a different week. But that's just kind of how I have them getting there. Same with the Texans. I have them beating the Colts because I don't think the Colts are going to get in. Rams, I have them, I think, winning 2 of the 3. Lions, 2 of the 3. Things like that. And the Seahawks are the really only team that after this week, and who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're getting pounded by the Eagles right now. But after tonight, I think they're going to lose at least 2 of the next 3 weeks not make the playoffs. Same with the Vikings. And I have the Vikings, as you can see, winning against the Lions. I just don't think they're getting in the playoffs. Even with that win, they don't get in because of tiebreakers, among other things. I think Green Bay makes a lot more sense. And then we get Battle of the Bays with Green Bay and San Francisco. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I didn't want to make it too long, but again, we're going into 3 different weeks and then all the playoffs. And I wanted to go into the matchups I liked for the playoffs. Again, I've said it a few times, but I really like Rams, Lions, just because it's 2 first-round picks. Or not 2 first-round picks. It's 2, well, they were first-round picks, and they're playing each other. I did think about the Bucks because you can get, I think I brought this up already, Baker versus the Rams. But again, there's so many connections. I tried to look for the most realistic, and there's really, like, sure, the Rams and Dallas could flip seeds. It's not very realistic. It'd be hard to get the Rams to play the Bucks. So one of them would have to win in the first round, and it's not that big of a draw anyway. He was only there for like a week or two. I think it makes much more sense you get Stafford versus Goff, and the difference in the cultures makes sense to me as well. So, and it sets it up where we can get a couple upsets and a couple favorites. And I'll go into greater detail, obviously. I might change my mind on Houston, Buffalo, but for now I'm going to roll with what I went over. And I'm going to stick to the preseason pick. Baltimore versus San Francisco. A lot of symbolism with both teams. It's kind of a rematch. Well, it is a rematch. The Hard Bowl, the Blackout Bowl. And I think they're going to do enough to get people thinking, okay, the Niners aren't good enough to consistently win. It would be 4 games if they don't get the first seed. And I don't think they're going to. I think it's going to go to Philly. And I wouldn't be surprised, if Dallas wound up taking that first seed and Philly gets the Falcons. That could also definitely happen. A little bit, maybe a Michael Vick connection there, So, you never know. But, again, that one's not too important. That one's more just a matter of which way the recipe's going to go. But for now, we'll just stick with this. Philly gets the first seed again, which, again, they did last year. I think Boston's going to follow the same suit. Noticing a lot of similarities with these teams. Boston got back to the championship. I think Philly probably will. Like I said, them and San Francisco makes sense to me. The public was kind of robbed of that matchup last year, so I think they'll get it this year. And I think people are going to wait for Lamar to fade out, and I don't think he's going to. Beginning of the year, I liked him to win MVP, and a lot of people challenged me on it, saying, oh, no, they're going to pull the rug on him. And I said that last year. I said, let's watch and see what happens. But by week 5, week 6, we're going to see if they're going to pull the rug on him. And sure enough, they did the whole fake beef thing, and now all of a sudden he's looking better than ever. So I think if any time, this would be the time to give Lamar the run. And just think of the comedy of it. While first versus last is interesting, so while Trevor Lawrence, the first pick in the draft, versus Purdy, the last pick in the draft, which has been my theory for a very long time, is very interesting. It's a draw. That's why I like the Niners so much, Mr. Irrelevant. What's so much funnier to me is watching goofy Brock Purdy go up against a unit like Lamar Jackson. That's a battle of the extremes if I've ever seen it. You have the dad bod with, he looks more like a frat boy with a dad bod, versus a cheat code in Lamar Jackson, who's just, his athletic prowess just puts Purdy to shame. He even makes better throws. So it really is a tale of Brady times 10, where he's obviously outmatched. But it'd be pretty funny watching Brock Purdy against Lamar Jackson. I know a lot of people were talking about like Lamar versus Hurts, because it'd be the first time we actually have 2 black quarterbacks, which they pushed last year with Mahomes and Hurts, but they pushed it with the light-skinned black quarterbacks. They love doing that. It's like they have this like fetish, it seems like, and they need to wait for the perfect time and the perfect guy to do it with, and they just pretend Doug Williams never existed. But it would be the first time it's two 100% black quarterbacks if we were to get Lamar and Hurts. So it would be interesting. We'll see if we get that. I I don't. I mean, I could see it happening, but I don't think that's what we're gonna get. I think they'll save that for another year. They just did it again with Mahomes and Hurts. I think the story that makes sense is, again, Brock Purdy, just the goofiest guy, the most unathletic quarterback, versus Lamar, the most Madden-esque quarterback that most people would love to build their team around. So yeah, hopefully this wasn't too long, but a lot of people tell me that they prefer me to go into detail for each of the teams because I know everyone rocks with different teams. But whether you think it's scripted or not, a lot of people still like different teams. So I know people that like Minnesota, people that like Cleveland, people that like the Lions, all these different teams. So yeah, I figured I'd go into all of their paths, and for the honorary mentions, Cincinnati, I just don't think it's happening without Burrow. That's why they're not getting in. Pittsburgh, don't think it's happening with the team they have. I think they're going to wind up getting a quarterback. I don't think Pickett's the guy. And then once they get a quarterback, maybe they look pretty good next year. Uh, Seattle, same deal. I think Geno's on borrowed time. I don't even know if he's still playing. I don't think they have enough. I think the Rams make much more sense. And then the Saints, Bucks, I just like the Falcons more. Green Bay, I think, gets in. Again, I think they make more sense than the others. Chiefs, beginning of the year, did not have them getting in. But I do now. I just don't think that they're going to go to the Super Bowl. I don't think they're winning it. Again, I don't have them going to the AFC Championship. So we'll see what happens there. And, yeah, Texans, another one I love. Texans, Browns. Browns, I was looking for every reason not to put them in. Not because I don't have any, bias towards any of these teams. It's just because I really thought you got to have starting quarterbacks. But they made a point of accentuating that Joe Flacco is not on the practice squad. He is their quarterback, and he's getting paid, $75,000 per win, and the guy's been in the playoffs. So I look at Flacco. I don't think Gardner Minshew. I don't think Trubisky like a lot of these other teams. I think of a competent quarterback that could definitely make the playoffs with an amazing defense. So yeah, I think this is a pretty accurate assessment of what we're going to get. Hopefully it ages well. The rivalries is a big part of the reason I picked it. And even if we don't get these exact matchups, I do think we're going to get a lot of these rivalries in the second round, or at least very close to it. And like I said, I think we're going to wind up getting pretty close to my championship predictions. The NFC seems pretty obvious because, do we really think the Packers are going to make it further than the Cowboys, Eagles, or Niners? They could, sure. But I think it's locked for those three teams. Well, those four teams. Lions, Niners, Eagles, and Cowboys. Whereas the AFC, I don't think it's locked to Bills, Chiefs, Jags, Ravens. I really think we could have two of those teams knocked out by the, divisional round. So we'll have to see what happens, but for now I'm going to stick with Ravens, Jags. Ravens get the win. And then and it'd be interesting because if it was Jags, Niners, like I said, we would get first versus last. But I'm going with Lamar versus Brock Purdy. So not first versus last, but just, the guy that's killing it versus the guy that's a complete goofball that nobody thinks is good without all of his teammates. So let me know what you think. If you think I'm too bullish on one of these teams or not bullish enough, if I'm sleeping on some of these teams, let me know. About the draft, let me know. I went into that. I think it's very fitting that Bill Belichick can get Pye and then get Caleb Williams, and they're being very quiet about that. So knowing that helps because they play some teams that if we know, okay, the Patriots have to lose this game to get Caleb, the Panthers have to win this game, it just helps us with our booking, if you will, with our picks going forward. So yeah, I think that's it. I can't think of much else. I guess Super Bowl MVP. I think that would actually probably go to Brock Purdy because he's not going to win MVP. Of course, I'm assuming he wins the Super Bowl, and they usually give it to the quarterback. And from Mr. Irrelevant, the Super Bowl MVP would be a pretty interesting story. especially again since it's going to be Lamar who wins the regular season MVP in my opinion. So I'll have our other picks going out later, of course, all basketball and all that stuff. I did want to get this out though because I promised I would. It just I knew it would take me a while, and I wanted to make sure I had it right before I put it out. So take care and happy earnings.